Alright, we are going to work on our second video of the HerdBoss series, and I want to introduce you to labels. And labels are pretty handy. You got to kind of keep up with them is one thing that I've learned, is that whenever you add a label, you have to remove a previous label if they're changing groups. But you can't have more than one label on a sheep. So we've created a set of labels that are kind of our common groups that we have for our sheep to be sorted into. Artificial AI group, or artificial insemination group, AI group, natural service breeding group, our fall or winter drop bands, depending on when we're lambing, if feeder lamb, lactation, mature flock, opens, project lambs for sale, etc., etc. So we have quite a few labels that we try to do. And where labels come in handy is when you get to the reports. And so we'll get to that in a second. But for example, if we go into my herd and I was to type in a label like lactation, it would show anybody that's had that flag. So that's where you've got to narrow it down a little bit by going into reports. Now, the reports are really useful information, but it does take some maneuvering to get the data out that you really need. So we'll start off with some simple ones, but then I'll kind of show you how we utilize this tool to help get to quite a bit of information. To start off with, one I like is just a quick glance, the sire offspring report. And so for the sheep unit this fall, we used Heavy as our natural service ram, but we did AI to 007, Nature Boy, and Rack City. But it gives us a quick count of how many lambs we have total, how many male and how many female, and also breaks it down by sire. And so we're definitely a female-heavy lambing this fall, and so which is good because we need to identify some prospective keeper ewe lambs out of that group. But it gives you a quick glance of what your sires have been doing and how many lambs you have out of each. So that makes it pretty handy. One thing you can do with any of these reports is add filters. So for example, if we wanted to look at last year, and we run on a fiscal year, so July 1st to June 30th. So if I were to put in July 1st of 2018, and then 6/30 of 2019, that would give you, we utilized 10 different sires that year and had 111 lambs total throughout that season. So it can kind of give you some ideas of what you've been using and where you're at relative to lambs. So I really like that. You could probably even sort by breed. Say if I wanted to add a breed filter and narrow it down to South Downs. We had one ram and had 11 South Down lambs. Or I could narrow that down to weather sheep and what we use there. So this gives you to where you can narrow down some data and truly see what you've got. And all of the reports run along these lines. The different reports just give you a different output of the data. One that I use a lot is my general herd report. And that goes through everything. And so you can set ownership. A lot of these I've discovered I always have to set the ownership filter to owned by me, because that changes and makes sure that I'm pulling from the current inventory. And say if we wanted to see how many lambs, or we could sort by DNA. Let's add a DNA filter and say we want just ones that are RR right now. There we go. We can pull that list. So it helps in terms of being able to find and isolate this various information. So that's where I like the herd report. Now, if you're going off marks, this will give you your lambing calendar of due dates of when ewes are due to lamb based upon their marking date. And so you have to enter on this report the actual marking date, not the estimated due dates. So like this would be our late summer breeding. We could put in early summer breeding, whichever one you're using. If you ultrasound, you can put that information in. Now these are some other reports that are extremely useful. the not marked report. That shows but you'll notice a whole bunch of sheep came up, and some of these I know we've sold. So I'm setting that ownership filter to owned by me. And then this is only giving use without marks for this year. And if you notice, we had 2 of them, but all of these are our young lambs that were just born this fall. So it's to be expected that they're not marked. And then we have some other ones down here. This group here are our yearling ewes, and we haven't expected them to really be marked until next spring. So we're down to 4 ewes that have not been marked. But sometimes we run out of chalk, sometimes we have issues that way. And if we come in here just to verify, we see that this ewe actually lambed in 2018. Her offspring were born November 1st. So even though she wasn't marked per se, she did lamb. And she's also got a lamb on the ground right now. So she got marked. And she's one of the ones that are, when we had a teaser harness on a ram, got bred. So that's why she didn't have her mark, because he had his teaser harness on. So you always have to verify the data. But that's an example of how we can use this report. You can also add a birth date filter. And if we wanted to filter out those lambs, we could just leave the first date blank and put an ending date of 9/1/2019 and run the report, and it pulls out all those lambs. Say we want to pull out any of the yearlings that we've got too. Whoops. Now we're down to the ones that haven't been marked. But then we can go through and check them. So as you're going through these various reports, use the filter tool. That's how it helps you to narrow down to get to the question you're trying to ask. A couple other quick handy reports. The breeding history report is nice. Shows all of your ewes and how they've bred the last however many years you have data. As you can tell, we just started using this in 2018, and so we don't have any of our 17 or before data in here. But the breeding history report is handy. You have ram reports, ewe reports, ultrasound from preg checking report. I would love to be able to start putting in a spot for carcass ultrasound data, because we collect carcass information on our sheep. Right now we put it under notes, but I would love to get to where that information is in the software as well. Medicine report, who's been treated with what. Another couple useful ones are the ram income report. And so right now we have all of our ram lambs. We haven't sold any lambs out of Bourbon, but we can see that over the last little bit we've sold 5 lambs out of Heavy and an average income. And so we've got to where we can start utilizing this data. It's going to take a while to get the data in there. The cull report. If you flag a ewe that says should be culled, it'll show up in your cull report. So as you're out in your flock, you can use your mobile device here and actually flag ewes while you're, say, if you've got them in the chute and you're working them and you're like, oh, she's got a bad udder, or, you know, she's losing her teeth and she's older, or she's losing body condition, or something that's going to make her a reason for culling, you can go ahead and mark her. To do that, it's pretty simple. You just edit your sheep and should cull, keep, or cull. And once you select that, then you're good to go. And save the changes, and then, for example, I'll mark her as a cull even though we don't want to. Save changes. If I go back to my reports, and again, you got to watch that ownership date, because I know a bunch of these that we've already culled. Now she's the only one that shows up as we need to cull. So that is very useful if you know, as you're out working them and you see something, you can really record it fast. I can't reiterate enough that the reports are very useful. They can be a little bit overwhelming, but once you learn how to filter within that, then you can really drill down on the data that you're trying to find. And the other thing that I want to just say real quick is that the HerdBoss app on the phone is fantastic. I have all my students have this, and as long as you just remember to sync every now and then between the phone and the cloud service that it's stored on, you're good to go. So I have all my students where we just hit sync when we're done putting in data. Very handy, very user-friendly. And actually on the mobile app, you can print a pedigree. They're going to be adding features that you can email all of the sheep's information to another user. So for example, if I sold a sheep to Joe down the street, I would be able to email him that sheep's report directly to him and share it that way so he doesn't have to put in any information. And that's one of the things I really like about this, because I've used this with other breeders that they've sent me the pedigrees, their information. I print an animal report when we sell an animal. So lots of useful tools. And so I hope you get a chance to play around with this. I hope this answers some questions on like just what kind of software we're using. We happen to like this one. Couple other features, and if you are holding a sale through many of the common sales and a breeder on their websites, they'll have your sales posted and where they're at, what website they're through, etc. on there by date. So there's a few extra features. They have, some good how do I use this. There's a manual and all sorts of different things. And like I mentioned, it's free right now, and they're going to start going to $5 a month. Frankly, it's worth that. I mean, it's easy to use. The mobile flexibility is awesome. So just FYI, that's a little bit about HerdBoss that we wanted to share with you.